Hello everyone, this is Tim Frost, Mr. Patience, and in this lesson on our MySewNet embroidery software, we're going to cover the basics, the very basics of adding lettering to your designs. There are many features in lettering and many features that there are yet to learn, which we'll cover later in later lessons. The first thing we'll do is start MySewNet. And here in MySewNet, we'll click on blank canvas to open the embroidery component. And we're going to go ahead and use a 200 by 200 millimeter quilter's hoop so that we have a lot of room to work with our different lettering in this project. We're not actually going to create an embroidery that will stitch out, but I want to have plenty of space to cover several different things. So I'll just click OK, and here we are ready to go. The first thing we'll do is click here on the letter tab. Now, adding lettering to an embroidery is probably one of the most important project items that you'll create. So we want to make sure that we understand what's going on this important tab of MySewNet embroidery. So we'll begin here at the left, and as with most of the items here and most of the tabs in the MySewNet embroidery software, we begin at the left and move to the right, just like reading a book, to go through in the proper order until we get to the end here to apply, where we actually apply whatever it is that we're doing and adding to our project. So the first thing we'll do is we have to set which font we're going to use. And right now, the default font here of Clarendon 12 to 30 millimeters is selected. But I want to see what other fonts there are available. So right here, we can click on the up and down arrows here to move through the fonts one font at a time. But that's rather cumbersome, and it's difficult to see exactly what's available for our project. So I'm going to move down here to the gallery view and left click here, and the gallery view opens up for the fonts. Now we can certainly see more fonts here, but I would like to see even more fonts. And what I'll do is down in the lower right hand corner of the gallery view, I'll position my mouse pointer so it's a diagonal arrow, double-headed arrow, and I'll left click and hold and drag the window to the lower right-hand corner of the embroidery module. And you can see that now we can see many more fonts. So what we can do is I'd like to page through these fonts and just get an artistic view of what they look like for now. So I can scroll with my mouse button upwards and move up and down through the list of fonts. And when I get to the top, I can see that the fonts are different categories. There's an applique category. And of course, what this means is that all of these fonts are applique items. This one here, for example, in Lombard Patch, has blue applique fabric here with a red satin border. Now, of course, you can change the applique fabric to whatever you want. And in some of these applique fonts, such as Crazy Patch 2 here, there are two different applique areas in the fonts shown by the blue area here and the yellow area. So you can have two applique fabrics in this font, whereas Crazy Patch 1 only has one applique area. The other applique area that's not shown in purple here does not have an applique fabric. Now, that's not to say that you have to put the applique fabric in. You can choose not to and just have the blanket stitches going around the entire font. Some other fonts have different pieces to them, such as the one shown here in Children. And you can see that we have a number of different fonts here. And here in Cheese and Mice, it shows an uppercase A, B, and C, and then lowercase in the mice themselves. For this particular font, the mice are chosen by choosing the numbers, and we'll look that over when we get to that font to talk about that. Some fonts have got a monochrome appearance, like Dog's Outline, and this one, Dog's UC, these have a colored area in the center of the font. And of course, you can choose whatever colors you want to use for those threads. But you can see there are many, many, many fonts here. As we scroll through them and go through, you can see what they look like. And this is the most fonts that are available in any home type embroidery designs. Let's talk about the names of the fonts now. This one says Antigua Patch UC. Now, what UC means is it's only available with uppercase letters, and there are no lowercase letters in this font. Here, where it says Arial Patch, you can see that here in the exemplar for the font, we see uppercase letters and lowercase letters, unlike for Athletic Block Patch UC or Antigua Patch UC or any of the others that have UC in them. When it does not have a UC or an LC to signify lowercase, then that means that it is both upper and lowercase letters, such as here with Lombard Patch and Lombard Patch here. There are upper and lowercase letters available for both of those. Here in Cheese and Mice, we see that it's all UC, uppercase. And there's also a note here that says 2C. This means it's a two-color font. And it's a fill type font that has this yellowish area of stitching, a fill area for the one color, and the darker area of yellow for the second color. And again, you can use whatever colors you want for these fonts. And this indicates there are two colors in that particular font. The next thing in the font name is a number, two numbers. For example, in Cheese and Mice here, there's 40-100 millimeters. Or here in Inform, the font name has 25-120 millimeters. These are the recommended sizes for the fonts. You don't want to use less than 25 millimeters in size for this font. And likewise, you don't want to try using more than 120 millimeters for this font. And some of these fonts, like Heart Initials, Inform Patchwork, and so forth, they have a special type of fill area to them. And we'll get into that and look at them as we examine those fonts when we try to use them. Now here in Effects, in the Effects area, you can see we have some that have, for example, this says felting loops and felting lines. These are felting type fonts. Here we have twin curl. These are for twin needle type fonts. And the two colors will be stitched at the same time. In this case, it's light purple and dark purple, but again, you can use whatever colors you want to use. Wing bold. These are for use with wing needles. The elegant fonts. We have a number of fonts that are elegant fonts, and you can see that many of them have upper and lowercase letters, and those that have numbers, such as Corinthian here, it has numbers as well as upper and lowercase letters. Here in Charteris, it only has uppercase letters, but it also has numbers. So it's important to understand that when you're choosing a font. If you want lowercase letters, then you can't use Charteris. And likewise, if you want numbers, you can't use Anglo-Saxon because it has upper and lowercase letters, but no numbers. But here we have a number of fonts that do have upper and lowercase letters and numbers. If we go down to something like Floral here and we look at this, it says Acorn, the name of the font, 6C, meaning it has 6 different thread colors to each letter. It's uppercase only, and the size range goes from 35 millimeters to 60 millimeters. We have a number of fonts, such as this category, a foam, that's meant to use embroidery foam in the fonts and gives us a 3D appearance with our fonts. Now, one thing I have to caution you about, if you use foam in any of your embroideries, always buy embroidery foam and not craft foam. Embroidery foam is formulated in such a way that when you tear the embroidery foam away from the top of the embroidery, you don't get any of the little pieces of foam that will remain behind that we like to call Klingons or Klingons, whatever you wish to call them. There's no easy way to remove them, so never scrimp and say, well, the craft foam costs less than the embroidery foam. Believe me, you'll pay for that difference in the embarrassment of the appearance of your final product. We look at these other fonts, and you can see they have all different kinds of fonts. As I said, we have many, many, many fonts that work in different types of projects. We have a My Fonts category, and there's possible to create, using the Quick Fonts tool, your own fonts and your own sizes from any graphic that you have, any graphic fonts you have on your computer, perhaps that came with Word or some other kind of textual application. We have national fonts that have some unique appearances, like Bamboo, Origami, Thor, Wasabi. But we also have Greek and Hebrew fonts. And there are guides to tell you which keys to use to get the proper Greek characters and use them in your project. Nearest point fonts are kind of unique, and nearest point fonts are best illustrated by this particular graphic here. The letter A and the letter B can be joined at the nearest point between those letters, which in the case of A and B is at the lower right of the A and the lower left corner of the B. But with the B and the C, the uppercase B and C, well, the nearest point to the B to the C is across the top, and it might also be across the bottom. However, with the lowercase a and the uppercase C, the nearest point is between the bottom right of the C and the bottom left of the A. This means that these fonts have 4 joining pieces, or 4 joining locations throughout the font. Upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right. So those are nearest points, and they're signified by the NP for nearest points. If we go down to the retro category, these are old style fonts. If we go down to scary, these look like they're scary type fonts. The script type fonts. Now, script fonts are different yet again. In script fonts, you can see here in Edina 12 to 40 millimeters, in between the lowercase a and the lowercase b, you can see the font joins together, so it looks like it was a script font and printed that way. So all the script fonts are that way. You can see here in braid, between the lowercase a and lowercase b, there's a clear and easy join. Same thing in calligraph and casual. So those are special fonts, and you can see we have a whole group of them running in this entire category here. If we scroll down to traditional, here are the traditional fonts, and they are the basic fonts that we've always had here, except we do have new fonts. In this particular version of software, we have Rosemary is different, is new, Ranchera is new, Jupiter is new, along with a whole host of other new fonts. Now, the absolute smallest fonts that you can use are right here in the traditional category. And here in line block, this is the smallest font. It goes from 3 millimeters to 20 millimeters and consists of only running stitches and might be difficult to make out in the 3 millimeter size. Because of this, you should stitch this out and try it out before you actually use it. Here in the micro category, these range from 8 to 50 millimeters. And here in narrow block, these are a little heavier. These go from 6 to 10 millimeters. So you'll probably want to stitch a few exemplars out in fabric that you might actually use with these fonts to take a good look at them. Now, I'm going to choose the Georgia 20 to 40 millimeter font. Now, the reason why I point that out is notice that here is Georgia 20 to 40 millimeters, and here is Georgia 8 to 20 millimeters. And you might wonder, what's the difference between these, except the minimum sizes and maximum sizes on these two fonts? Well, that's precisely it. We have those two fonts there. We have Antonia from 5 to 10 millimeters, or 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and 15 to 35. We have Arial, 8 to 14, 14 to 20. We have here Romano from 14 to 35, and then 35 to 70. The reason why we have these multiple fonts here in Story, we have 15 to 30 and 25 to 60 millimeters. And the reason why they're in there, and they're duplicate fonts, and they are duplicate fonts, okay, is that you might think, for example, that I'd like to use Georgia 20 to 40 millimeters, but when I spell out the words I want to use, I find I probably need to go back to Georgia 8 to 20 millimeters. And so let's start with that right now. That'll be a perfect example of when we want to switch these type fonts. So I'll click here on Georgia 20 to 40 millimeters. It's selected, and notice that it's now here in the font window up above. And there it is right there. So the first thing I want to do, I think I want to type my name in, and I'll put it right here. So I click here in the letters box, and I'm going to type in my name. And for now, that's all I want to do, just type in my name. Now, the next thing over to the right says, well, what size do you want this font to be? And I say, well, let's leave it at 20 millimeters, because I'm not sure, Timothy's a pretty long name, I'm not sure if it's going to fit in the hoop here. So let's just leave it at 20 millimeters for now. The next options we have are the layout options. We have gap, which pertains to the amount of space between letters, and we're set at 0 right now. That's the default setting. 100%, this is the percent of the width of the font that we're going to use. When the font is digitized, the letters, each letter have a certain width, And it's showing here that our minimum percent of width is 25% to 400%. So we can make the letters themselves wider and narrower, but we'll just leave it right now at this. And the same thing applies to the percent of height. The next category here is shape. And these are also referred to as envelopes, because what these mean is right here, when I touch it, it says horizontal block. That is, we're going to place multiple lines of lettering in a shape, click and drag the control boxes to resize the lettering and change the shape. And that's just horizontal block. If we touch the next shape, it says vertical block. If we touch the next shape in the tooltips, this one says place a single line of lettering clockwise around a circle. Hold down Control, then click and drag the control box to move the lettering without changing the size of the circle. And we'll see that. So you need to look at each one of these tooltips to see what it means. But there's a lot of reading to be done here, and you need to experiment with all of these things to make sure you understand how they work. If we click here on the gallery view, then you can see that we actually have 35 different envelopes that we can put our lettering in. We have circle clockwise, circle counterclockwise, full circle, and so forth and so on. But we're just going to stick with horizontal block, the simplest and most used one right now. I'll click on that, and we're going to use that. Reverse. Reverse is an option that will mirror the image that is created, mirror the lettering. And we'll cover that in a few minutes as well to see what that looks like. We can choose individual, and individual creates individual letters so that you can move and resize the letters however you want. And it says right here in the tooltip, individual is available for horizontal line, diamond, pennant right, pennant left, perspective, and italic. Only one line of lettering can be made when individual is selected. And I'll show you that in action in a minute. Let's click here on counterclockwise, circle counterclockwise, and watch what happens here to individual when I click on this. Well, you see individual is now grayed out because we cannot use individual in circle counterclockwise. So that automatically stops you from thinking, well, I want to use circle counterclockwise, but I want to use individual. Well, sorry, but you can't do that. So let's return back again to horizontal block, and you can see individual is ready. Step is not available. Step is something that is used here in fit to straight line and fit to wavy line. And if you read the tooltip, it says rotate the text independently using the step option. So if I click on step, it's now available. But oops, individual is not, because the fit to straight line is not listed here on this tooltip. Likewise, this tool, fit to wavy line, individual is not available, but step is. So it's rather complex, but you have to look at this to learn how to use it properly. Connection is the next thing over. This one says trim. Now this says in the tooltip there, select trim connection so that compatible machines, that is machines that have trim capability, will automatically trim the thread before and after each letter. This option says running stitch, and running stitch connection between the letters with small stitches for small lettering using nearest point fonts. You should only use the running stitches when using nearer point fonts. And with nearest point fonts, especially if you're stitching on something that has a pile to it, such as terry cloth, or fleece. Now, stitch type, the next option here, it says use stitch options to change the properties of the stitching used in the lettering. If stitch type area is dimmed, this means the font was designed with properties that cannot be edited. Now, this particular font has properties that can be edited, so I can left click on stitch type, and it says right here satin column. That means this font is created with a satin column type of stitch object. And if I left click on satin column, the properties dialog opens up for the satin column. Now, I keep using the word properties, and that is an official term used in the software and one you must understand and learn how to use. It's showing us that right now this is a satin column, and that here are the properties. There is no stitch pattern in there right now. It doesn't have any underlay, and this is another official term in embroidery. It has no zigzag, no edge walk underlay. There's no compensation set in this particular font. The density is 4. There is a possibility of using a gradient where you can turn this on and use either a single color gradient or a multicolor gradient. And we'll go into these in future lessons on lettering. Right now we're trying to stick with the basics. Now, the reason why I mentioned the properties in the first place is because when you read properties, that means there are things you can go in there and change. The pattern is a fill pattern that you can change on this particular type of stitch object, and a stitch object is an official word. Underlay is an official word. These mean stitches that go back and forth to further stabilize, and stabilize is an official word. That actually means this will help keep the stitches in the shape that they appear to be. Compensation is an official word that we'll go into later as well. But we don't need to change any of these properties now, so we'll just click on cancel here, either cancel or the X in the upper right hand corner to simply close the properties dialog and not make any changes. The next thing is alignment. Do you want everything left aligned or center aligned or right aligned? Because this lettering is only going to be on one line, then changing the alignment won't really make any difference to us. And spacing, we can change the spacing in the letters, and we'll see what that means in a minute. Let's click on apply and see how it looks. Well, we can see that it fits within the hoop, and this is a selection frame for the lettering. Notice that you don't have the flipping handles, so we can't flip the letters upside down, and we can't flip them left to right. And the handles on this lettering right now are green. And the word green and graphic both begin with the letter G. And what this means is this is not actually an embroidery object yet. This is simply a graphic object that we can change the size of, we can rotate it, and we can make many, many changes here with the menu here, where we can click here, and this is available on some types of lettering, and we can change some properties of the lettering, but this is very complicated, and we'll go on to this much later. I'm going to just left click on that, and that drops the selection box on the lettering. But I want to open the properties box on this, so I'll click on the lettering to select it, And then I'll right click, and on this drop down menu, the very first thing says Fix as Stitches. Now, what does that mean exactly? Because we have Fix as Stitches, we have Edit Lettering, Handles, Satin Column. You see, if I left click on Satin Column, we can go back to the properties for the Satin Column. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to close it. I'm going to right click here. The handles. These are the handles that show up when we left click on this handles menu. Straight, diamond, double diamond, arch, curve, and so forth. Well, if I right click here and go down to handles, it shows up in that manner. If I left click on lettering, then the letter properties dialog opens up. And here in letter properties, I can click here and change the lettering in case I misspelled something or just wanted to say change to Tim Frost. I don't want it to be Timothy Frost, just Tim Frost. So I can left click in here in the lettering, and that's my insertion point that's blinking just to the left of the O in Timothy. And I can touch my delete key on my keyboard, and it deletes the letter to the right side of where my insertion point is. I can insert a new line if I want. I can hit enter and it will put Frost on the next line. I can change the size here. I can change the width, for example. I can change the angle here if I want to change the angle. The connection type and the shape, for example. Here are the different shapes. Now, there are not 35 shapes here. These are the only shapes that I can convert to right here. If I decided I wanted to use one of the shapes that's not listed here, but is shown up here in the shape menu, then I have to reapply the lettering so that it fits the new shape that I want to use. Here's reverse and step. Those are the same as reverse and step that are up here. And the line formatting for alignment and spacing. I'm going to just click on cancel for now. And that's my lettering that I have in place. Now, I could convert it to stitches if I want, but I don't have to. If I said I want to put an embroidery in here, say an embroidery of a fish, for example, I can do that. And it'll put the embroidery in. I can move the lettering around all I want. If I put the lettering so that it's outside of the stitch area, which is this area with the grid on it, then you can see that the handles turn round. And this means that this is not within the stitch area, and so I won't be able to save this as an embroidery stitch design. So I'm going to move it back in to the work area, or I could leave it here, for example, and then go back here to the Home tab. And while I'm here in the Home tab, I can come over here and click on a new command we haven't gone over yet that says Move into Hoop. If I do this, watch what happens. All we need to do is move to the left. So I'll click on Move into the Hoop, and there it is. It's just barely in the hoop. If it were outside of the hoop, both too high and too far to the side, and I click on Move into Hoop, then it will move the lettering to the left and down so that it fits into the hoop. You can see there it is. And this works the same way no matter where we are. Move into Hoop, move into Hoop. It places it just inside of the hoop. But of course, what I really could do is click here on Center in Hoop, and it places it right in the center of the hoop. Now, let's right-click on this again, and let's click here on Fix as Stitches. Now, when we do that, Notice the handles turn into scaling handles. These are the white handles. Okay, and remember we saw the tooltips on scaling when we used resize here. And here in the tooltips, it mentions in the second line here, the handles in the embroidery selection are blue when resize is selected and white when scale is selected. But notice also that now we have the flipping handles. So if I click on this handle, it flips the lettering upside down and then right side up. If I flip this way, it turns it to read from right to left and from left to right. And we can also rotate it now to the exact angle that we want. So if we want it slightly rotated like that, then we can do that now. So that is a basic lettering application that we've done. When we go back here to lettering, it's that way here. Let's get into something a little more advanced and see what happens when things seemingly go wrong. I'm going to hit delete here to delete that lettering. And while it was selected, the software knew that when I hit delete, I was referring to that. Now, let me click here. And I hit the end key on my keyboard to go to the end of the letters. And I'm going to type in the year of my birth, Timothy Frost, 1948. I'm going to click on apply. And, oh, there are numbers here in this font. But remember I said earlier there were no numbers because this said ABC, ABC, and it didn't say ABC 1, 2, 3. So it's just barely possible that there might be letters here and numbers. And the only way you can test for sure is to try it out. If there were no numbers, let me go in here and try a different font. Let me try condensed block. And it's now selected. And there's Timothy Frost, 1948. I'll click apply. And it has numbers in there too. Let me come in here and try this font, Acorn, Timothy Frost, 1948, apply. And, let's see, there are numbers there too. However, they do not resemble the font itself as much as it resembles in here. And another thing you have to note is this. This 1948, look at the numbers. They don't match what we call the baseline. Let me move this up a little bit so that it's right on that grid line. And the Y here, that's called a descender, and that's the amount that extends beneath the line, the baseline. And the top of the T and the dot of the I and the top of the lowercase t and h extend above the top of the lowercase letters, and they are known as ascenders. But here with 1948, I wish that these could be lined up. I'd really like them to be lined up like 1948 here. And in fact, I'd like this 1948 to be taller so that it was as tall as the letters here. So in this case, what you need to do, I'm going to go back to the first font that I used down here in Georgia. I'm going to do Timothy Frost, 1948, and I'm going to have to turn on individual. And I'll click apply. And now you can see that Timothy Frost, 1948, they have these handles around them that indicate that each one can be individually edited. So if I left click to deselect that and then right click again to select it, you see as I select each letter, it has a selection handle around it, so that I can click here on the 9, for example, and then move down to a four-headed arrow and move the 9 up a bit and move the 4 up a bit. And so the 9, 4, and 8, and click on this, and I can move it up just a little by left-clicking and moving everything up just a bit. But the 1, it needs to be taller and also wider. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold the control key down, and we had the 8 selected before, and now we've selected 9, 48, and I'm going to left click and drag them over, but oops, the 4 didn't get selected. So I'm going to have to click away from them, hold control down, and click the 9, 4, and the 8, and I'll move them as a unit over to the right here. Now I'm going to left click away, left click on the 4, move it down so that it's the same height as the 948, and then I'm going to click on the 1 and I'm going to drag it to the right. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold shift down and I'm going to make the 1 taller as I go to the right. And remember that holding shift down controls the aspect ratio of that area that's selected, so that it basically is the same height and width as the other numbers. So now I have 1948 there, and I left click and drop that. And now what I'd like to do, I'd like to get rid of these other ones to get them out of the way. So I'll left click to select this and hit delete. I'll left click to hit this and left delete. I'll left click on this one and hit delete. So judging from the size of it, I'll either have to make all the letters smaller or maybe put 1948 on a second line. So I would like to select 1948. So what I can do is come down here on zoom to rectangle, and I can come down and look at this now, zoomed in, and I'll left click here on my scroll bar to move over to the right, but I'm too zoomed in, too close. So I'll click here on zoom to fit, so they're both the same. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to select all of these letters. Well, to do that, I need to come back here to Home and click on one of the selection options here. And Box Select is the one that I'm going to select. I'll click on Box Select, and now you can see the little box on the tail of my mouse. And I'll come up here and I'll left click and drag, and I can make it very large like that if I want. But the software snaps right back to the only thing that's in that box that can be selected. So now I'll move my mouse pointer up till I have the four-headed arrow, left click and hold, and move this down, and I'll just put it down there temporarily. Now I would like to select my last name and move that over to the right. Well, in order to do that, I can left click on F for Frost, hold the shift key down, and if I click on each letter, well, I'm only selecting one letter at a time. If I hold control down and left click, I'm adding to each selection. So this is now a group, and I can left click and move it to the right. And then I'll do the same thing with Timothy, except I can move this, I need to move this over like that, and I'm going to select my whole name by using Box Select again. And now I can left click and move that over. And then I have to line things up based upon where they are in the work area. If I click on my last name again, it's only selecting one letter. So I'll go back to Box Select and select my whole name. And we snap back to just the lettering. And I can move it around so it looks okay. And then Box Select, I'll choose that again. And I'll drag it around my birth year. And then I'll drag it up like this. And I'll line it up around the rest of the lettering. And that's how we work the lettering when we use individual. Now, let's do it a much easier way. Let's go ahead and over here on Home, and we'll click on Select All. And you see everything is selected. And I could click on this and move it around as a group if I want, but I just want to delete it, so I'll delete it. And let's go back to letter. And now I'm going to do it the right way. Timothy Frost, space. I'll hit enter. But then I still have a space to the left of, you see, I'm hitting the arrow keys, and I have Timothy Frost, space 1948. I'll hit the delete key so that it says Timothy Frost, 1948. Now, the way to do that right is I'll move to the end, Timothy Frost. I'll hit enter. And now I'll just type. And I just typed born, space 1948. My alignment says center the alignment. I'll click apply. And, oh, what happened? Oh, darn, I left individual on. So I have the individual letters. So I'll just turn individual off. I'll click apply. And now I have what it is that I want right here. Let me highlight this again. I'll go over to Home. Say Box Select. I get it all. I hit delete and it's gone. And so now I have exactly what I want. If I left click on this, both top and bottom lettering are selected. Now the numbers aren't lined up, but I showed you how to do that before. But suppose I did this. I'll delete that. I'll go back to lettering. And I'm going to turn individual back on to make a mistake here. I'll hit apply. And there it is. Well, I'd like to delete everything here. So I'll come back to Home. And, I forgot about Select All. So instead, I'm going to hit Box Select. And I'm just going to go like that. And I didn't select the whole set of letters. And I release my mouse button. Looks like nothing happened. Well, that's correct. Nothing happened. Because when you select something, you can go ahead and say Box Select. And then go like this if you want. And it will snap down and only select the embroideries. Okay? But if you go like this and say, let's just select this. Well, it only selects the beginning. It selected those few letters because I included the entire letter. But if I go like this and hit release my mouse button, nothing is selected because individual is selected over here. And this is why I say there's quite a bit to selecting letters and working with letters. It's not a one lesson thing. So I'm going to go ahead and over here on the Home tab and say Select All and hit the delete key to get rid of everything there. So now let's go back to lettering. We have individual turned off. We have 2 lines of lettering. Let's hit apply. And as I look at this, if I click away from here, I see that the descender on the Y here is very close. In fact, it might touch the top of the B. For example, if I said something like this, if I said, let me change the lettering here, and I'll delete Timothy, and I'll just type Boy Frost, born 1948, and I'll just hit a couple of spaces here in front of the word boy and delete some spaces there and hit apply. Well, you see the Y is getting very close to the top of the B, the uppercase B. And if I hit alignment as align to left and then hit apply, it's even closer. So suppose I wanted to move those apart. I wanted to use B.Y. Frost and born 1948. Well, if I right click here, okay, I come in here and I can click on edit lettering. And now here you see I can add space between BY and I can change the alignment. I can click here and that looks a little better, but it's still too low. I'll right click here, go into properties again. And now what I want to change here is not the gap, because I could change the gap. Now let me change the gap, say to 50. And whenever I make a change like this, I change and make it a large change, because if I made it 5, we might not see the difference here in the software. So I'll make it 50 and I'll click OK. And you watch the Y and the FROST. And you see it affected the spacing in all of the lettering. I hit Control Z to go back to here. I'll go back into Edit Lettering. And I'm going to change this, the gap from, it was 50 before, that's just way too much. I'm going to go to Edit Lettering. And now, you know, let me change spacing here. Maybe spacing will do the trick, because I don't want the gap. I don't want to, I like the gap. The gap looks fine to me. Oh, something else I can do with gap. Let's try this. Oh, look at the tooltip. It says minimum minus 99 to maximum 99. See, if I change the gap to, say, minus 20 and click OK, then it reduces the gap. The gap is the space between the lettering. So I'll hit Control Z to go back to where it was, right here. I'll go to Edit Lettering. And now what I'm going to do is go down to here to spacing. It says 1.2. And it says the minimum is 1.0 and the maximum is 5. Let's change it to 5 to see what happens. Because, see, I always like to do this. We'll change it to the max, and then we'll be sure that we don't miss it. I'll click OK. Yes, I see, yes, okay. That's the line spacing. Control Z. I don't know why they didn't call it line spacing, so that you would have to remember this. Now this says line formatting, but I think it should say line spacing. So now I'm going to change it, say to 1.4, and let me hit OK. And there, that seems to be just about right. Okay. Now it might not be just about right if I take these these numbers, which are taller, and make them taller, so there's as tall as the letter B, That may come close to a descender over here, and I'll have to adjust the line spacing again. But this is just the very, very basic things to get you into putting your lettering on your embroidery. Now, if you were to say, like, this is all I want to do, I want to take this and I want to go back here to home, I want to say center in hoop because I want to stitch this on a little blanket or something. And when I go over to here and I say File, Export, I want to export to a VP3. I'll click OK. It says I'm going to export and put it in Family Gifts Designs. And I have to change this name here to and I'll click on Export. And it's done. But notice that this is still has green around it, which means that if I wanted to, I could expand this and make it much larger because it's just a graphic at this point. It's not an embroidery. You see, if I went like this and said, I want to make this much larger, and I'm going to go over here to resize. I want to resize this, but I can't click on this. Why is that? Because it's not an embroidery design. Now, I can hold Shift down and maintain the aspect ratio and make this pretty large. And now I'll right click on it and say Fix as Stitches. And now it's an embroidery. And if I go to look in Life View to see how it looks just fine. The lettering isn't very thin. It doesn't look strange. It looks okay. So I can make it that large. Okay. However, if I do a Control Z to go back to being in graphic format, and I say, no, you know what? I want to make it this big. Okay. And I'm going to right click and I'll click on Fix as Stitches. Well, this is truly large, and I'll look in the Life View, and this is very, very large. But if I came here to lettering, and I said, I just want to put one letter in there, a capital B. And the size, let's see, it says it can be 40 millimeters, but that's not enough for me. I want it to be 200 millimeters. And I'll click on Apply. And man, that is big. I mean, that exceeds the size of the recommended size for the letter. Well, notice right here, there's a little glitch in the letter. That's because this is a satin stitch, and these satin stitches are so wide, there's a glitch there, and there's a problem here. Let's look at it in Life View, see if it's okay. It still seems to be okay, but there are cases where it might not stitch out at all. So you do have to be cautious about using a size that you can actually use. So I hope that you've learned something about lettering. Although as basic as it is, you've learned something about lettering here in this class, and there will be much, much more to lettering, as you'll see as we progress from these very rudimentary lessons. And as we step into lesson 3 and start to go into detail back on the home page with some additional things that we need to learn there. before we move into the advanced ideas of lettering.